Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I am going to be starting a new series where I'm looking at the subclasses for the monk in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and then I'm going to do a ranking of all the monk subclasses from the 2024 Player's Handbook as well as previous sources against each other and see how we're sitting now with the 2024 rules. And I'm going to begin, I think I'm just going to do this one in the order they're presented in the book. And the first subclass we have presented in the book is the Warrior of Mercy, which is an update to the Way of Mercy subclass first presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. At the time, I considered Way of Mercy the most powerful monk subclass, with the big condition that you aren't playing an adventure or, God forbid, a campaign where the enemies are regularly immune to the poison condition, because that can happen. And that makes a huge difference for a Way of Mercy monk. Now, there are no truly new subclasses in the Player's Handbook or the 2024 Player's Handbook, but the Warrior of Elements is a complete reimagining. So it's almost like a new subclass, though it does replace the Way of Four Elements monk. Warrior of Mercy, however, is very similar to the version we saw in Tasha's. However, when I analyze the Warrior of Mercy features, I must now compare them to the updated subclasses, which can change the perspective. So let's get started. And we're going to begin at level 3, and the first feature we get is Hand of Harm. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike and deal damage, you can expend one focus point to deal extra necrotic damage equal to one roll of your martial arts die plus your wisdom modifier. The damage we should expect from Hand of Harm is similar to the damage we would expect from the extra unarmed strike that we get from Flurry of Blows. Now, monks, I should mention, normally prioritize dexterity, so it might be 1 or 2 points less damage at certain levels for the same 1 focus point cost, at least until level 10. Though, I will say, if you want to make a monk that focuses on wisdom first, then Mercy is actually a subclass that does reward that decision. Another thing I should probably mention is that in the 2024 Player's Handbook, all our martial arts die scaled by 1 die type. So when it was a D4, it's now a D6. When it was a D6, it's now a D8, etc. This usually leads to about 1 point extra on a martial arts die roll. So our Hand of Harm technically is improved because it does that little bit of extra damage over the previous version. And yes, Flurry of Blows does give you 2 unarmed strikes with your bonus action, but that's replacing the 1 unarmed strike you would have gotten with your bonus action anyways through martial arts. So it is 1 extra unarmed strike until level 10. However, the big advantage of Hand of Harm over Flurry of Blows is we don't need to roll the hit. We're applying it to an unarmed strike that has already hit. So it is a more efficient way to deliver damage. Not saying you have to choose one or the other, but if you're comparing the two, Hand of Harm does damage more efficiently than Flurry of Blows. Now, if you're thinking that you can only deliver Hand of Harm if we hit with an unarmed strike, so if we don't hit, then we're not doing any damage with it, that is true. But if you don't hit, then you don't expend the focus point. Well, with Flurry of Blows, you expend the focus point first, and if you miss, the focus point is still gone. Also, I should say that this says that it is extra damage on the unarmed strike, which means, the way I read it, if you apply it to critical hit, you should get an additional martial arts die to the damage. Of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be a case of one or the other. For maximum damage output, you could use Flurry of Blows and Hand of Harm on the same turn, more than doubling the extra damage you would expect from Flurry of Blows alone. However, you have limited focus points, so if you start doing that, you can face running out if you start, piling on all these expenditures at once. And although I would expect more damage from Hand of Harm over an unarmed strike, the damage type is necrotic. So I took a look at the 2024 Monster Manual, and this is what I found. 20 of them are resistant to necrotic damage, and 26 are immune to necrotic damage. And if we compare this to bludgeoning damage from unarmed strike, 31 are resistant, a lot of them being swarms, and 0 are immune. And that's just until we can switch the damage of unarmed strikes to force damage, which, and I double checked this, in the 2024 Monster Manual, 0 are resistant and 0 are immune. Force is without question the most reliable damage type in the game now. So necrotic damage is probably less reliable than bludgeoning damage now, and much less reliable than force damage. That said, if you want to do as much damage as possible, Warrior of Mercy is the only monk subclass in the player's handbook that provides an extra damage feature at level 3. Now, Warrior of Shadow provides a combination that potentially could lead to more damage, but it requires setup, requires maintaining concentration, and also faces cases where it doesn't work. So in terms of dealing damage, Warrior of Mercy is the premier option among players' handbook monk subclasses. Speaking of doing as much damage as possible, a Warrior of Mercy also should consider whether they want to use a weapon with their attack action. A weapon can deliver more damage than an unarmed strike at level 3, though that won't always be the case. At higher levels it won't. But if we're only making unarmed strikes with our bonus actions, it does reduce our chance of landing an unarmed strike, which is required for us to deliver a Hand of Harm. That said, personally, I would recommend not shying away from using weapons. You are going to get plenty of opportunities to spend all those focus points one way or another. Warrior of Mercy gets another feature at level 3, and that is Hand of Healing. As a magic action, you can expend one focus point to touch a creature and restore a number of hit points equal to a roll of your martial arts die plus your wisdom modifier. When you use Flurry of Blows, you can replace one of the unarmed strikes with the use of this feature without expending a focus point for the healing. So, Hand of Healing heals the same amount that Hand of Harm delivers, exactly the same amount. You can provide that healing to yourself or to an ally within your reach. If you are in combat, naturally you should always deliver this as part of Flurry of Blows, since the cost of Flurry of Blows is the same as doing this with your magic action, so it's just more efficient. In fact, if you don't want to lose the extra damage that Flurry of Blows would normally provide you, what you could do is do Flurry of Blows, and then you can deliver a Hand of Harm and a Hand of Healing with the same Flurry of Blows. So you hit once, you deliver a Hand of Harm, then you do Hand of Healing with a second attack. And effectively what you're doing is you're replacing the lost Flurry attack with extra damage from a Hand of Harm, though you will need to spend twice as many focus points to do that. Now, in general, I would expect most monks to have a 16 dexterity and wisdom at level 1. So at level 3, this would heal a d6 plus 3, or 6 or 7 points on average. A Cure Wounds spell cast at first level will probably heal 12 points on average for comparison. That was not the case before the rules update. But unfortunately for the Warrior of Mercy subclass, it did not benefit from the improvements to healing options that certain spells and certain class features got. If we look long term, a Warrior of Mercy monk with a plus 5 wisdom modifier at level 20 could expect 11 to 12 points of healing from a single use of this feature, which is approximately the same as a Cure Wounds cast from a first level caster. Still, if you want a monk that has a healing option, Warrior of Mercy remains the only monk subclass that has that option. And we still have one more feature at level 3, which is a ribbon, and that is Implements of Mercy. You gain proficiency in the Insight and Medicine skills and proficiency in the Herbalism kit. Insight and Medicine are both wisdom-based skills, which should fit well on a character where your wisdom is normally high. A Herbalism kit will allow the monk to craft antitoxins, candles, a healer's kit, and most importantly, potions of healing. So this is a ribbon feature, but it's a pretty good ribbon. If we look at level 3 as a whole, we have a pretty solid ribbon, then we have 2 features, both of which are decent, though neither are amazing. And I should note that none of these level 3 features change from Natasha's versions of the subclass at all, though I would maybe compare the Hand of Healing a little bit differently since we're comparing it to improved healing options. I would argue that both Warrior of Shadow and Warrior of Elements get more dramatic features at level 3. Though I think Warrior of Mercy is still providing a pretty decent suite of features here with a bit more versatility as well. I think it's worth 3 out of 5 stars. Then we have Physician's Touch at level 6. Your Hand of Harm and Hand of Healing improve as detailed below. Hand of Harm. When you use Hand of Harm on a creature, you can also give that creature the poison condition until the end of your next turn. And then Hand of Healing. When you use Hand of Healing, you can also end one of the following conditions on a creature you heal: blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned. So let's start with Hand of Harm. We are talking about delivering the extra damage from Hand of Harm and automatically applying the poison condition, which imposes disadvantage on all ability checks and attack rolls. The poison condition is not nearly the worst condition to get, but applying it automatically is really big, especially since we're probably going to do Hand of Harm anyways. What it does is it places a significant offensive debuff on your enemy that you're concentrating on. Now for the bad news. If we look at just the 2024 Monster Manual, approximately, a little less than, but approximately 1/4 of monsters are immune to the poison condition. There are 38 undead in the Monster Manual. 34 of them are immune to the poison condition. There are 92 fiends in the Monster Manual. 68 of them are immune to the poison condition. This is one of my main experiences with the Mercy Monk since it was published in Tasha's. What happens is I plan to make a Mercy Monk, and then the DM advises me I might not want to do that. And to those DMs, thank you. Because how frustrating would it be to play a character where one of your primary subclass features never works? When it works, though, it's really good. And there will be adventures and even campaigns where it works almost all the time. So it's very, very swingy, because it's not like you're going to expect to not be able to use it in 1/4 of combats, because you have campaigns where your primary enemies are undead or are fiends, and then you're not going to be able to use it ever or hardly ever. Well, you'll have other campaigns where undead and fiends just aren't really part of it, and then you'll be able to use it pretty much all the time. I was really hoping we would see fewer monsters with immunity to poison damage and the poison condition in the 2024 rule set, since so many feats and features and tactics rely on it. Unfortunately, all these options remain unreliable as they've always been. Then we have the improvement to Hand of Healing, that in addition to restoring hit points, it can also remove one of these conditions. Now, a Paladin's Lay on Hands feature can remove the poisoned condition, and once a Paladin gets to level 14, it can remove any of these conditions, including stunned, which used to be just kind of a Mercy Monk thing. But when a Paladin does it with Lay on Hands, they lose 5 points of healing in order to do so. Hand of Healing heals the hit points at the same time. The healing is not reduced at all. Lesser Restoration, for comparison, can remove blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned, but it cannot remove the stunned condition. In fact, the ability to remove the stunned condition is really, really rare in D&D. Before Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I am having trouble of thinking anything less than a 9th level spell that could do it. Stunned is really the standout on this list of conditions it can remove. Again, at level 6, we have no changes from Tasha's. So if you have played a Mercy Monk before, up to the level 6 features, you will find no changes. Honestly, it's kind of a shame they decided to put Mercy in the player's handbook, since so little apparently was worthy of change. However, both these benefits are pretty substantial upgrades to the level 3 features, and the value is frankly going to depend on how often party members get stunned, and how often your enemies are immune to the poison condition. Put those two factors together, you can probably see how good your level 6 Mercy Monk is going to be. These upgrades could be an absolute standout among monk subclasses in the right situations, or worthless in others. But I do think they are above average as far as 6th level features go, worthy of 4 out of 5 stars. At level 11, we have Flurry of Healing and Harm. When you use Flurry of Blows, you can replace each of the unarmed strikes with a use of Hand of Healing without expending focus points for the healing. Previously, you could replace one of the attacks. In addition, when you make an unarmed strike with Flurry of Blows and deal damage, you can use Hand of Harm with that strike without expending a focus point for a Hand of Harm. You can still use Hand of Harm only once per turn. You can use these benefits a total number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Okay, so basically they've upgraded both of the features again, just like they did at level 6. Hand of Healing can now replace every attack from Flurry of Blows, and Hand of Harm can be applied to one attack from Flurry of Blows without costing a focus point. So basically what this means is by level 11, you would want to use Flurry of Blows constantly. Except there are two big old elephants in this room. The first is Flurry of Blows scales to 10th level, providing 3 unarmed strikes with your bonus action, which is basically 2 extra attacks over just using martial arts for a bonus action attack. This means, in theory, you could use Flurry of Blows and do your Hand of Healing 3 times on the same turn. The Way of Mercy Monk subclass from Tasha's never had a chance to do that because Flurry didn't scale, so it makes it better. With a D10 martial arts die, we're probably talking 3d10 plus 9 healing as a bonus action, not counting removing potential conditions, for the cost of 1 focus point. The other, unfortunately, huge elephant in this room is they threw a massive nerf on this feature. The feature did not used to have limited uses. Now it is limited to your Wisdom modifier uses per long rest. For most monks, that's going to be 3 uses, and at best 5 uses. This restriction doesn't just apply to Hand of Healing either. If you want to use Hand of Harm without expending that focus point, you must instead remove a use of this feature instead, which is going to be far more limited in use than your focus points. So you are not removing the resource cost of Hand of Harm. In fact, it just gives you an option to use a resource that's even more limited. That doesn't really feel like an improvement to Hand of Harm at all. Your Hand of Healing technically does get an improvement, but it's so very limited now. And this nerf is the only change to this subclass from Tasha's. And I've got to presume it was added as a way to make sure Mercy Monks aren't using Hand of Healing 3 times on a turn, with the only limitation being their focus points. Granted, that would have been a big advantage to the subclass, but this needlessly limits Hand of Harm as well. It basically loses out on its upgrade here. And so half of this feature is just made worse than it was in Tasha's. And whether the other half of the feature is any better or as good as it was in Tasha's is very questionable. This used to be a really nice upgrade to both Hand of Harm and to Hand of Healing, but now it's arguably not an upgrade to Hand of Harm at all, or at least hardly an upgrade at all, and the upgrade to Hand of Healing is very limited, 3 to 5 times per long rest, making this definitely a below average 11th level feature, 2 out of 5 stars. And I want to note that before this was revised in the 2024 Player's Handbook, I would have given this feature 4 out of 5 stars. It's really too bad. And then, level 17, Hand of Ultimate Mercy. Your Mastery of Life and Energy opens the door to the Ultimate Mercy. As a magic action, you can touch the corpse of a creature that died within the past 24 hours and expend 5 focus points, so pretty expensive. The creature returns to life with a number of hit points equal to 4d10 plus your Wisdom modifier, and if the creature died with any of the following conditions, the creature revives with the conditions removed: blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned. Basically the same stuff you remove with Hand of Healing. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. So there are no changes here from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And honestly, this is a pretty good option if an ally has died. It does not impose the penalties that Raise Dead or Resurrection impose, never mind the casting times of those spells, and Revivify gives the target 1 hit point And of course, there's a costly component. I mean, all those spells have costly components. So this is probably the best way, by far, to revive a dead companion. Probably even better than a wished resurrection. Still, hopefully you aren't dealing with dead companions all that often. And ways to revive dead companions started to become available as early as level 5. This is a level 17 feature. So for what it does, this is a good option. But what it does is, at least normally, not needed that often. And it's not the only option in those cases. And the costly component of something like a Revivify, along with that 3rd level slot, aren't that big a deal when you're 17th level. I mean, this feature is definitely not worthless, but it's below average for the level. 2 out of 5 stars. Mercy Monk, in my opinion, was the most powerful monk subclass before the 2024 Player's Handbook. And it suffers for 2 reasons. The first is that the other 3 subclasses all got really big boosts, and Mercy didn't. And it is now being compared to those subclasses. The second is a pretty severe nerfing of their 11th level feature, and that hurts the subclass at those higher levels. Even then, Mercy Monk isn't a bad subclass. It should deliver damage as well or better than other monk subclasses. So if that is your focus, Mercy is a good option. And the healing does add for versatility that other monks don't have. So overall, I think that Mercy is still a decent subclass, competitive with the other subclasses. But as far as it being the best monk subclass now, well, I guess it depends what you want out of your monk subclass. But I would say, in general terms, I would not consider it a standout at all anymore. And I do want to put a final note here. I am making a small adjustment from my Sorcerer videos, where I will be discussing multiclassing as part of my ranking video rather than just repeat myself video after video. So there won't be any multiclassing advice in this video, but stay tuned. When I do my ranking video, there will be. And that is it for the Warrior Mercy Monk. Way of Shadow is up next. Until then, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.